All right, here we go. We're back again with our second podcast. Today's topic is going to be about 13 Reasons Why. The new Netflix series, well, technically it's not new at this point, but there's a series on Netflix about suicide and a bunch of different other topics, you can say. There was a book originally about it, but from what I've heard, I see that the book is a lot different from the actual series on Netflix. But it's been very controversial all over the world, specifically in Connecticut. Since we're here, we've been, seeing a lot of different conversations about it amongst parents, teachers, providers, and friends. And at one point, the series was being discussed like pretty much everywhere on social media and in the news. And a lot of people took sides on it. Some people supported it and others didn't. A lot of people said that it did sensationalize suicide, drugs, and sexual abuse, and it kind of didn't really provide, I guess you could say, a positive insight for teens and young adults about suicide and mental health. And those who did support it just really recommended that teens did watch it with, someone of age or a parent or someone to kind of explain, what's going on and let them know that there are resources and things like that out there. So we're just going to discuss pretty much, what we think about it and, what does everyone feel? Was it appropriate, or you guys who did watch it or saw it or heard about it, what did you guys think?
Yeah, I read the book when I was younger and I watched the TV show. But anyways, I just think it's good that the conversation's out there. I think it's just best. So many people have talked about it. Good or bad, it's just good that people are talking about mental health, period.
Absolutely.
But the thing with watching, I think most people, when the book came out, at least 5 or 4 years ago, no one reacted at all when it was a bestseller. Most of my friends did read it. So I think there's something about the fact that people are watching it visibly with their eyes that parents have a reaction to. But I think that it's just important to get out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've read the book and I've watched it. I've always liked the book, and I think I agree with Liv in that I think it's a really good. It's good to have stuff out there on it. However, what really bothers me about it is how it's become a lot of times as a joke on the internet. Sure. You see a lot of things being, "This is your tape" over something stupid. I'm just thinking making suicide into a joke. It's not something you can joke
and
about.
For those of you who aren't familiar with the show, the premise of it is it's based on this book, and the idea is this girl Hannah Baker commits suicide and leaves behind 13 tapes that are directed towards people who have influenced her life mostly in negative ways. And so they have a tape for each person. So what Sydney's referencing is the whole "this is your tape" thing, is sort of making a joke out of when someone does something negative towards you.
Yeah. But I think another thing is it also breaks down suicide and reasons for suicide into specific reasons. And I don't think that's how it falls
portrayed
for a lot of
exactly.
people. I did when I was watching it, one of the things, I've had personal, experience with someone committing suicide that I love, and the thing I think they did a really good job is portraying, the anger, especially how, Clay felt, and they portray very well actions, but I think just how they portray suicide as a whole is not altogether realistic, that there's certain defined reasons why someone commits suicide. I think it's very mixed.
Yeah, that's very true. They didn't touch upon the fact that she had a mental health issue.
Exactly.
Things that happened to her, and then all of a sudden she decided to. But one thing I did think was good about the show that the book didn't have was it really touched upon, how affected the parents were and how affected the friends were. They almost even, I don't know, not many people notice this, but I read it in an article that they even made it darker, the whole screen, the effect was darker after she had died than when they did the flashbacks, when it was lighter and brighter, almost as if when she was alive everything was happier and
more positive.
Yeah. And then so you really felt more a gloomy effect after she had died. So they did make it seem like it wasn't, people reacted horribly afterwards.
Yeah, so obviously there's this big difference in the way that the book was written and then what we saw on screen. And I think that's where most of the issues are coming from. And you're so right, Liv, about kind of seeing things on screen and having a visual for something, especially with something as controversial as suicide, because sometimes you don't know the words to say, you don't know the right way to bring up something that's so sensitive and could mean different things to other people. So so do you guys think that that 13 Reasons Why was a good idea, well, a good start rather, to kind of just open the conversation about mental health and about suicide, or do you think there could have been a different way or a better way?
I think that absolutely it's a great way to start the conversation. There are definitely things that I think maybe would have been better to have changed.
Yeah.
But I think especially since like people really start exhibiting symptoms and like becoming aware of mental illnesses when they're a teenager, like that's when they mostly present themselves, and that's when you really start realizing that people in your life have those issues. Sometimes it's sort of like covered up until you're an appropriate age to like talk about it. So I think it's definitely a good way to introduce some of these ideas to teenagers, and also kind of show, like as Liv was saying, that like there are really negative effects on the people around you, like especially like her parents are shown to like be really affected by this, and like Clay. But I think one of the things that a lot of people were criticizing about it is that in the show there aren't any positive role models for like what you should do if you have.
Exactly.
It's all people who are struggling, and none of them seem to be getting like any sort of help or searching out any sort of resources. So to kind of almost like gives a perception that there's not anything you can do.
Right.
There's no hope. Exactly.
Yeah. One big thing I noticed was there was a therapist in the show, so there was the guidance counselor that was like kind of around a lot, but when she was actually alive and going through everything, she never went to him until the very last minute before, and she would kind of
brush it off.
Yeah,
exactly.
He brushed it off. That was a big thing about the show, that like he brushed it off, and then that was kind of the one thing that she like. He was the last one to get one of the tapes because he was like her 13th reason why, because he didn't like do that extra effort to like help her. But that also gives kind of a bad reputation of a therapist, which is kind of
I think there's a lot of people that deal with depression and suicide that don't reach out for help, and maybe they should. Yeah. And because it's something that's hard to talk about, especially if you're feeling suicidal, or you might not feel like you deserve help, or you don't want to like you just don't know how to express and ask ask for help. And there are counselors out there that don't necessarily they don't take it seriously, because it's something people joke about all the time, and it's not something they should, but it happens. So I think what they're trying to do there is portray like the worst case scenario. But
no, that's very true. Like they made it very negative, like she shouldn't have. The therapist felt bad, like you saw the therapist and he felt like it was his fault, but like the viewer knew that, you know, there wasn't anything the therapist could have done, and she didn't have to. It wasn't based on, you can't just rely on a therapist.
Exactly.
I think what's more upsetting is how like the people that were around, that were like the subjects of the tape, how none of them reached out for help. Like you see, which is something understandable, because I think a lot of people feel like it's their fault after a suicide. But I think if we're going to talk about like how there was a lack of portrayal of resources, I think that's a better place to be like, look here, they didn't portray any resources, because I think a lot of people that succeed in committing suicide don't have the resources they
absolutely
need.
And the support from their family, which we definitely saw. That just really, you know, brings up the idea. That's why a lot of people were against it. They kept saying, instead of explaining that there are 13 reasons to live, there were 13 reasons as to why she decided to, you know, actually go ahead and commit suicide. So they said kind of just that focus. But I do think that it was a great idea to kind of bring something like that out, because I haven't seen anything like that with myself growing up, where people actually talked about it and made an entire. And right now, Netflix is a thing, right? Everyone's always on Netflix, but the fact that it has become so popular and has taken off, and there hasn't been as much discussion in the beginning, you know, with the book and things like that, kind of, you know, started to freak me out a little bit, because it's like, wow, if anyone can access it on Netflix, you know, our siblings, you know what I mean, middle school and things like that, I'm just like, it gets a little
it gets very tricky in that age,
because you just never know. Like, we can totally look at something and say, and pick out the point to go, oh well, she should have, or he should have, or this is what, you know, our better steps, because we're aware.
If it's a young kid and they're not portraying any supportive resources,
exactly.
It might be like it's reaffirming the idea that
exactly.
That's why I personally believe that I think it's good that the topic is brought up by the series. I don't think it's the way to approach the topic of suicide.
Absolutely.
Through entertainment is not the appropriate way. And I think an important difference between the book versus the TV series is the book's more of a warning, watch your actions. You don't know the effect that they have on other people. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't go as in depth with the people's lives as the series goes. And I think it's the reason there wasn't as much on the suicide is because the book doesn't talk as much on the suicide. It talks more on this person did this and it had this effect on people. So I think the thing that one of the things I talked about, me and my sister both talked about it and we were talking about in the last episodes, they portray the main character committing suicide, and they have a lot of scenes that are very graphic that I don't think are necessary, and it's more for the entertainment value and just for the experience. Yeah. And that's what one of my biggest problems is. It brings up the subject of suicide and it has realistic portions of it, but I think it just makes it into something so abstract and more entertaining than it needs to be.
Totally takes away from the point, right? Yeah, I definitely get that. So that's
yeah, I mean, another point is that that I noticed is the backlash, you think that you never know how people are going to react overall, but a lot of people said that they were expecting suicide clusters because of it. Think about it, the reasons why we think it's bad is because people watch it and they get ideas about oh, this person did something bad to me, I want to get revenge by committing suicide. So that's an awful way to think about things, but they're actually from the what has happened because of it in the news, no one, I've never heard, at least I'm pretty sure there's been no one who committed suicide and used anything leaving tapes or anything like that being a big deal. But there's also a part, I understand.
No one really, it's very rare.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's very rare. But the idea
a suicide note is pretty common.
Exactly. It's less common than I think the statistic is somewhere around 10% of suicides actually leave notes. Mm-hmm. Most suicides happen without anyone knowing the reasons or why.
Yeah, that's true.
One positive response, though, I think that we've definitely seen, I can't remember if you brought this up earlier, is that I want to say is a school in Connecticut that created the 13 Reasons Why Not.
I think it was in Connecticut. I think it was.
Yeah. And it's just basically, the idea is it was called 13 Reasons Why Not, and it was talking about their reasons not to commit suicide.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cool at least that we're bringing it to the table and talking about it.
Exactly. And I know a bunch of different schools have also kind of just sent notes home to parents and just made them aware of what's going on, kind of giving them almost a forewarning, hey, this is out there, and maybe start the conversation with your child or watch it with them, or just kind of even watch it first and then let them watch it, if that's something that you want to do in your household. But at least the conversation has been started, and
exactly.
Because I know once something is popular in school, it spreads like wildfire.
There's no way to avoid it.
Exactly. So it's, at least that conversation has started, and then providers and parents and teachers and stuff are kind of working together now to move forward and figure out what's next. And I think they're making a season 2.
Yeah, they are.
Right. So
they're continuing.
I wonder how that's going to pan out, especially with all the feedback that they've been getting.
It'll be interesting to see if they incorporate
how exactly. And I just think they probably should just incorporate more, clinical, folks, and kind of let them understand, more professionals who know how to deal with that, because you can't just make something for entertainment purposes that's this serious, and then sell it to our audience, young adult audience, because that's primarily who's watching it, right?
Yeah, impressionable kids.
Exactly. I wouldn't be surprised though if this is included in someone's curriculum or eventually,
definitely,
right? I could totally see this
being
because
part
I know
of the
that the first season they only did they have the whole season. They only did the first half of the season is out right now, and they already finished all the 13 tapes. So I think hopeful at least that the last season they're going to include how you said clinical, right? I hope they actually get to the basis of why it wasn't, smart, and like what happened and what you can do,
exactly.
like resources, just things like that. I
think it'd be good, and I haven't looked in to see if this is being done, but if the cast members or people involved in the productions were like making some sort of public, like everyone
like
has
a
social
PSA,
media,
that'd be
like,
really good.
I feel like that'd be a good way to approach it, because if you enjoy the show, then you'd probably like at least maybe like looking at the social media or of the people involved in it.
What's so amazing is they probably didn't even think that this would blow up to be as big as it was. So they're probably just like they don't even know what to do at this point. There's like celebrities talking about it. It's just it's a really, really big deal. But I am happy that it has segued into a big conversation like this. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that is the end of our podcast. Let us know what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and leave your comments in the forum. See you later. Until next time.